everyone. I am really excited to discuss with you one of my favorite topics here, and I'm entitling it Exponential Returns. And what we're going to do is we are going to dive into Scripture and use data to see and understand God's graciousness and how well He rewards stewardship in heaven based on what we do here on earth. And so there's going to be two parables we're going to look at. We're going to look at one in particular, but a lot of people are familiar with the parable of the talents, where a master gives talents to three servants. One servant gets 5 talents, one gets 2, and another one gets 1. And then the master comes back after a period of time and asks, how well did you do investing these talents? And then, we'll dive into that a little bit, but there's a similar parable. It's called the parable of the minas. And a lot of the core aspects of it are similar to the parable of the talents, but there's some differences. And we want to dive into that because it is rich. And so, without further ado, let's dive into this topic. So, what I'm going to do here, comparing the parables. So we started it, but I want to do a little bit more of a deeper dive. On the left-hand side, we have the parable of the talents, focusing on it from Matthew. And then on the right-hand side, we have the parable of the minas from Luke. Now, we're going to focus on the left side. We'll drill down this list. So, as I kind of mentioned, the theme of this, really kind of this overarching storyline, is basically a master gives some money to the servants, goes away for a period of time, comes back to judge and reward the servants. Okay. Also, as mentioned, in this parable, the master gives 5 talents, 2 talents, and 1 talent to each of the servants, but based on according to the servant's abilities. Now, another key aspect of this is a talent worth about, we're just going to say about $1 million based on, that's a significant amount of money, right? In today's currency. Now, there's a reward, which is a key component of this. What's interesting about in the parable of the talents is for example, when that servant who had 5 talents comes back to the master and says, here are 5 more. The master says, well done, I will set you over much. And then says, and you will enter into the joy of your master. But what's interesting here is that the master says, I will set you over much. It's left to be ambiguous. We don't really know what does that mean? What does that look like? And so that's kind of the summary of the parable of the talents. But now if we move over to the parable of the minas, there's a lot of things that are similar, but then there's some differences. So the first bullet point on the top there is very similar. Master gives some money to the servants, goes away for a period of time, comes back to judge and reward the servants. But now, the second bullet point, the master gives 1 mina to each servant. But this time there's 10 servants, and each servant gets 1 mina, so they all get the same. So that's a distinct difference. Then, so with each servant giving 1 mina, approximately that's about 3 months' wages. When you look online, there's some research. It's maybe more, maybe less, but we'll just go with 3 months. For the purposes of this, it's not going to really matter exactly what it is, but this will just kind of give us an idea, directionally, of what we're talking about here. Then, very importantly, the reward. So what is the reward for faithfulness? Well, in this parable, the master is very explicit about what the reward is. So when that servant, one of these servants comes back and says, Lord, with your 1 mina, I have earned 10 more. The master says, well done, I will put you in charge of 10 cities. So what's neat about this is that, one, in this parable, the servants had less money to invest. 3 months' wages is a lot less than $1 million, we'll just say. But also, the reward is very explicit. It's, I will put you in charge of 10 cities. And for the servant that comes back and says he has 1 mina, the master says, well done. Sorry, the servant that comes back with 1 mina and says, I have earned you back 5 more. The master says, well done. I will put you in charge of 5 cities. So there's a lot of richness in this parable here, the parable of the minas that we're going to dive into. Okay, so with that, we're going to go into this. And I am not going to read all this. There's no way I'm going to read all this. I will summarize it. I already did, but I'll be fast. Okay, so master goes away. He's crowned king. Some of the servants don't like him. He comes back. Well, sorry. And before he leaves, he gives them all a mina. We've talked about that. He gives them all a mina. 1 mina. 10 servants. Everyone gets 1 mina. he comes back. He asks, how well did you do investing in my mina? The first servant comes back, says, Lord, your 1 mina, I have earned you 10 more. Master says, well done, my good servant. Because you're trustworthy in a very small matter, take charge of 10 cities. I love that he says in a very small matter. That's true. The second servant says, sir, your mina has earned 5 more. The master says, take charge of 5 cities. Then another servant came and said, your 1 mina, I kept it hid and laid away in a piece of cloth. And the master's not happy with the servant, and then says to those surrounding him, take that mina from that bad servant and give it to the one who has earned back 10 minas. And the people around says, sir, he has 10. Why would we give him more? And this master replied, I tell you that everyone who has, more will be given. But as for the one who has nothing, even what they have will be taken away. Okay, so there's a lot of good stuff in here. We're going to focus on the key areas. One is the mina. We've talked about that. That's the key aspect. That's what the investment is. The second is the reward, cities. So the mina, that's the investment. We know we're going to go with 3 months' wages. Cities. Okay, but cities. What does cities do? What did that mean in the mind of the hearers back in Jesus' day? So that's what we're going to go into so that we can kind of get an idea of what we're comparing here. So this is what we'll talk about next. So I'll flip to this next part. So we did some research trying to find what's the average size of a city back in Jesus' day. There were cities, there were towns, there was villages. Came across different research, and the one that I'm pointing out here I like the most. And again, we don't have to be exactly accurate, right? Like, it's going to be impossible. There's not great data back in the day. But I like this guy's approach. It's ingermanson.com. I like it. Basically, he's triangulating some data. He has some data points. He's running an algorithm to kind of extrapolate out like what he thinks, basically what the computer program would say. And I like it. It makes sense. What you'll see here is city number 1 had a population of like 10,000, we'll just say. So it's kind of a bigger city. City number 2 would be a population of 5,500. And then dropping down to number 3, which is then now he's kind of classifying it as towns, to about 3,800. All the way down, you'll see down to villages, which is right around maybe around the 400 people in a village, something like that, right? And it even breaks it down like per acreage and all that stuff. It's really cool for those who want to geek out about it, but I like it. It works. So for our purposes, I'm just going to say, I'm going to take the lower amount, which says 5,500. I'm actually going to drop it a little bit more. I'm going to be conservative. Let's just keep it easy and say 5,000. So let's just say in Jesus' day, an average city, plus or minus, let's say had about 5,000 people in it. Okay, so that's what we're going to go with. So keep that in the back of your mind, because I want to go back to the minas, because again, that's kind of the core of this. And then we're going to pivot back into the cities as well. So let's follow me. Let's go with it here. So we're going back to the minas, as I mentioned. What this is showing is 1 mina was given to the servant, right? To this first servant. We're going to focus on that first servant that earned 10 more. And what he returned wasn't a total of 10. It was actually 1 that was given, and it says he said, with your 1 mina, I've earned 10 more. So it's actually incremental. So actually in total he had 11, but he earned 10 more. That's kind of a neat fact just kind of think about. And then here's the key thing. Now we're going from minas, 3 months' wages, to cities. And this is where the mind should start being blown. Because just as the master said in that parable, well done, you've been faithful in a very small matter. I will put you in charge of 10 cities, he says, right? Let's highlight the very small matter. Think about this. A mina, if we're saying it's worth 3 months' wages, okay, I mean that's a decent. I mean that's a decent amount. If we were to use in American terms today, an average household income is about $36,000, about $3,000 a month. So 3 months' wages would be about $9,000. That's how much the person was given. When the master came back, that person that gave back 10 minas, that would be the equivalent of about $90,000. That's a lot of money, but it's not that much if you think about it. When it comes to, I was given $9,000, I did well with it, and then now you're going to put me in charge of 10 cities? And if every city had on average 5,000, so you could just extrapolate it out, you see on the right hand side, it's about 50,000 people. That's exponential is the best word that I can use to describe that, right? Exponential is like, it's not a straight line up, it's like a hockey stick. That's the best word I can use to describe that. And and then also, so that's the exponential return. But here's the graciousness. If you remember in that, because that servant was so faithful, what the master said to the servant that wasn't faithful, the master said, take his mina and give it to the one who had 10. So essentially, this guy, he had the 1 that the master gave him. He earned 10 by himself, and then the master gave him another 1. What we don't know is, does that 1 mina also mean another city? We don't know that. I'm not going to extrapolate that out, but that's just an interesting angle. But the point here is, the core of this is looking at the gold bar, the 10 that he earned, gave him 10, put in charge of 10 cities. What this does is it shows is that our faithfulness, our stewardship on earth, it might just seem so menial. It might seem so mundane. What God is saying is, if you do a good job in this, you don't even know. Like, it's going to be hard to imagine what that could equate to in heaven. In our natural thinking, it would be, okay, I am faithful with money. I do well in that, so then you give me more money. What God's saying is, like, I am looking at what you're being faithful in, and I can apply your faithfulness. I can apply it to other things. So when it comes to your kids, if you're being faithful with your kids, you might say, oh my goodness, right? Like having to feed them every day, change them, whatever it would be. Okay. Do you think a child is worth more than a mina? Do you think a child is worth more than 3 months' wages? Worth more than, 10 minas? $90,000? Absolutely. What about 2 children? What about a spouse? What about yourself? What about your body? What about the money that God's given you? What about the gifts, the spiritual gifts that he's given you? What about other physical gifts that he's given you? If you think about all of this, he's just giving us a little slice of insight into what this means in heaven when we're being faithful. And so in so many ways, there's at times that I just need to put on what I call horse blinders. And I just need to say, God, I'm not going to care about what other people are being faithful in. I'm going to just focus in on this, what you've given me, what you've put into my hands and my lap, on my table. I'm going to be faithful in this. And it might seem mundane. The returns on it might not seem like anything. But when I go through something like this, when I see something like this, the encouragement, the wind that it puts in my sails, it's like, okay, I'm going to keep plowing ahead. I have no idea what's going to happen with it, but I'm going to keep plowing ahead. Now here's the other verse that I want to share with you that hopefully will go off like a really good bomb, a positive bomb, spiritual bomb in your soul. The Apostle Paul quotes Isaiah and says, I'll pull it up here. He quotes Isaiah, and this is from 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verses 9 to 10. He says, as it is written, what no eye has seen, what no ear has heard, and what no human mind has conceived, are the things God has prepared for those who love him. Okay, let's unpack this. In context of what we just went through, I love that the Apostle Paul here writes, and what no human mind has conceived. Think about today, in our context, what the human mind has been able to conceive. Think about the movies that you have seen. Think about Star Trek. Think about Star Wars. Think about the movies, the stories, whatever the human mind has been able to conceive. What Paul is saying is that what the human mind has been able to conceive, like, okay, that doesn't count. It's beyond that. That's what God has prepared for those who love him. And that's what this parable underscores and highlights. Being faithful in this very small matter. You're going to put me in charge of 10 cities? Like, what? That doesn't make sense. This is what I want the encouragement to be for those of you who listen to this. Is keep plugging away. You don't lose out to discouragement. Keep plugging away. The little faithfulness, the little obedience that you have on earth right now is going to pay dividends that are beyond exponential. So keep plugging away. I hope that this is as encouraging to you as it is to me. And I will look forward to sharing more in other videos, and I'll look forward to seeing you in other videos. But until then, have a great day, and we will talk to you later. Thank you.